So I'm going to bring back onto the stage the series editor for BBC Arena, Anthony Wall, and the co-director, David Tedeschi.
It's, everybody will agree that makes a change. Certainly with all television. And I'm so very proud to be involved with that. David, we learn in the film that there are 15,000 articles in the New York Review of Books, and in my experience, they're all like about 99 out of 100. How did you go about marshalling such a vast array of material?
Yeah, I have no idea how we read through it. You know, I started to read the review in 1975, and I read it, you know, maybe every issue for like 10 years. So it gave me kind of a background for what it is. But you know, when we started this, I was in the desert in California, and I just read. Everything is online, by the way. The whole review, you pay for a subscription, it's all online. And I read the first 10 years, and of course it's Morning Men, Vidal, just this amazing material. And we knew we had certain challenges, like how do you make something about ideas and about a magazine? How do you make it emotional? How do you make it entertaining? And slowly, you know, we came in on some of the, you know, these writers and their writing and their ideas and the conflicts between them. But also, you know, how... No conflicts between them. No, and somehow none of it, at least to me, whether it's about fiction or art or political struggle, none of it seemed trivial. And I think it was important for us to kind of include all of that and capture it somehow.
I'm just going to ask a couple more questions. I'd really like to throw it open to all of you. A very obvious question. How did you go about choosing who to approach to contribute?
Well, like I said, I was in California when we started. I came back to New York, and we knew, you know, the review had come to Marty, and we knew we wanted to do this movie. We didn't really have any money, and we noticed, you know, we opened the pages of the review, and the reading that you see with John Didion and Daryl Pinckney and a lot of different people there was an ad in the review for it, for that event, and we're like, oh, well, we should film that event. And there was a party with the event. We had access to many people, and that's essentially what we did over the course of the year. Do you need to?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt your answer. We have a little bit of an addition to the Q&A. So, I got the thumbs up. On Skype, we're going to have the other director of the film for you to talk to, throw some questions at. The one, the only, Martin Scorsese. Hi, Martin.
Hi, who are you? How are you?
I'm Hussein Karimboy. I was emailing you for a long time to make this happen. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, I was working yesterday until about midnight, so we were able to work out a few minutes here today. So I know David's there, I hear. David, how are you?
I think it's great. It's raining. It's England. But it's great.
So, how can I be assisted?
We also have Anthony Wall here, and I think Anthony wants...
Hello, I can't see anybody,
Hi, it's Anthony, and a very
Yes.
appreciated full house here for the
Oh,
premiere. Yeah, we're very, very pleased to see you, so welcome to Sheffield.
thank you, it's a pleasure.
To make the best use of the time, I'd really like to throw this open to the audience. So Hussein will take the microphone up and you'll field questions from the people who come along.
Okay, who has a question? You had your hand up first. Just talk real quick into the mic.
Hello, thank you. Just a really quick question. What I thought was immensely powerful about it was the kind of continuity through change. So the fact that they were able to retain the sort of spirit of the New York Review of Books, whilst this is immense political, social, technological change. Through working on the film, do you think there are any lessons that we can learn from them, from how they were able to do that?
Did you hear that, Martin?
Not quite, I'm sorry. The technological changes you're talking about? You're asking about?
So they were the... This is so... I'm listening with them.
I know.
Okay, so...
You're talking about technology, yes.
Yeah, and they were able to maintain the spirit and the ethos and the ethics of this wonderful review through incredible technological, social, political change. How were they able to do that? And was there a tension in that? And what can we learn from them?
Well, I think from attempting to work with David on the film for a year and a half now, I think it's certainly an ing of like-mindedness, even though they may disagree with each other, but there's a great like-mindedness, and that's about finding going, as he said with the Joan Didion, as Bob Silver says about the Joan Didion sequence, where going beyond perceived acceptance of acceptance of the reality or the quote truth unquote of a situation, and saying, wait, it can't be that simple. It can't be that. I think we may be acting out of an emotional hysteria, and to try to be cool-headed and have an enjoyment, I think, an enjoyment, but also a fighting spirit to make sure that another side of the issue is heard or explored, as opposed to popular criticism and popular belief. I think this is something that is amazing in that it isn't stamped out of the review and those who were writing for the review for so long.
That's great. Thank you, Martin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Grand.
The picture is gone.
Who has a question?
Mm-hmm.
Just hold the phone.
Hi, thank you for talking to us today. Could you tell us the difference between doing something like this and a rock documentary like your Dylan or Rolling Stones? What did you bring to this? What they brought to us was a great challenge, I think, to David and myself. And the challenge was that, yes, with a quote rock documentary, unquote, or rock film or film that deals with music. Music for us, David and I, we were able to really have the music take us through a structure. I don't even know if it's a structure, it's a story maybe. The point about in working and deciding to work on these stories, on Bob Dylan, on George Harrison, a concert film like Shine a Light, the idea was to let the music carry us and let the music tell the story. But what I mean by that is not the lyrics of the music, it's the tone of it, a sense of trying to create a story like a piece of music. First it's finding the story, in the case of the Dylan film, in the case of the Harrison film, in the case of the Shine a Light. I mean, it basically is a concert, and it has to do with the longevity, has to do with rock at 60 years old, or rock at 65, and blues-based, and this sort of thing. And in any event, here, we don't have that. Here we have language, here we have ideas. And I think David and Mike and everybody did an incredible job in trying to visualize or have a visual supplement to the language that's used, to the using the ideas of the writers and the contributors, like music, to take us through. And this was a big challenge. This is a big challenge because it was a matter, I think, of making the that community, the New York Review of Books, interesting in a sense visually to a younger audience, possibly to people who have not read it, people who who yet to be introduced to this sort of thing. I think to make it something that hopefully is memorable, that makes you want to read every article in the New York Review, which is difficult because over the years I do still have stacks of them. I can't get to everything in it, but the whole thing is about curiosity too. I mean, if you're curious about the world, and curious about people, and curious about who we are, it's fascinating. So let's make the film whet that curiosity. That's the idea.
That's perfect. We have time for a couple more questions. Yes, sir, just 1 second. I'm going to come over to you. Sorry, folks.
Hey, Elise, I can't get the picture again. Although I can't see anybody, it's just me. But.
Hello, I just want to say just congratulations on making such an exceptional film. For me, I didn't know too much about the New York Review, so I found it, very educational more than anything else. I just wanted to ask, in terms of filmmakers, what did you find were the biggest difficulties and obstacles you faced making this film and telling the story so well?
David, would you want to ask that first, or?
Yes.
David?
Yeah, I got the mic now. Well, I think it's some of the things that we've talked about all along. That's some of the stuff you touched on right now is, how it appears to be a dry subject. How do you make it emotional and how do you make it entertaining? We even talked about this a little bit before we hooked into the Skype, that, these writers and their points of view are so strong and they have such great screen presence that we knew that we had to pursue. That's the first, like Gore Vidal and like Susan Sontag, that was a beginning kind of to access the material. What do you think?
Well, accessing the material is one thing. First of all, it's deciding on which ones to deal with without making it seem, which ones to highlight, so to speak, without making it seem like a chronological history or a very pedantic kind of, ABC kind of instructional film of how these things are done. That again is from the subject matter, the writer, the contributor, the subject matter, the contributor, the time, the context of the world and America at that time, and New York even at that time, which would then take us emotionally, I think, and as I said before, kind of musically to the next topic. Time and space seems, we have to go beyond that. And stay away from a traditional chronological approach. The idea is to throw, I think a lot of it's so exciting. A lot of the articles on a lot of the history of it is so exciting. And I do remember back coming from, a small Italian-American community on the Lower East Side, which is now no longer there, which is replaced by a very chic world on Elizabeth Street and modern Mulberry, walking 5 or 6 blocks west on one street, Houseman Street, and winding up in Greenwich Village and signing up to Washington Square College at the time, which is part of NYU in 1960. And I remember coming from a place where there was people were not in the habit of reading. And so it was a struggle to read. Struggle to get books. There were no periodicals. A I'll never forget seeing that first issue on at a newsstand that had these extraordinary magazines, including Sight and Sound, by the way, which I'd never seen before. And I think it was 61 or 62, and then the article here, I think it was 63, of course, is the New York Review. But it looked different, and New York at that time was in this extraordinary newspaper strike, and there was nothing for 90 days, I think over 90 days. And so films weren't being reviewed, nothing was being, you didn't get any news. And so it looked like a newspaper, so I picked it up. And I was sort of hooked on reading it. I didn't get it. I was 18 or 19. I mean, I didn't understand a lot of it. But it was always fascinating and interesting. And I began to get different points of view from the world I was in, the world I came from. And between that and being acclimated to a different kind of education, New York University, from what I had been a part of prior to that, opened up a whole world to me. And over the years, I think over the years, particularly in the 80s, it's something I always found to be challenging, forces me to try to think, may disagree, may agree. I have no idea on some of it, but it's interesting. It's always fascinating and interesting. And so that was the thing to touch upon. How do we open these ideas? How do we get people, younger people, particularly excited about this sort of thing? Particularly in a world now where, as everybody says it's cliche, but it's true. You need to get the information right away. So there's no long form. Or, how should I put it? Maybe the world I see around me, popular world, I should say, there is no long form. And so, I come out of the 1950s, too, where in America you did have shows, 1950s and 60s, like Dick Cavett Show, where people could talk, the Susskind Show, on television. Even The Tonight Show with Steve Allen was a variety show, but Jack Kerouac was on, Salvador Dali, and it was a different time. I also become aware of this kind of thing, concerned about the long form. I just am. I don't, I'm sure other people are much more involved in this, but I have a young daughter, and I see how they perceive information. I don't know how they perceive it, I should say, but I see how they're receiving it in fragments and bits and pieces. And just the chore, I think, an extraordinary obligation to so much as to be taught to the younger generation about who we are and what's happened, that I just find an excitement trying to, and I find a necessity, an obligation to try to put that information out there and to force them to think a little bit about the other side of it, another aspect of the issue, the history of what has happened up to this point in time. At least certainly in the schools they're going to now, it's not only the Western world, it's the Eastern world too. In the 50s, we were just taught about America and Europe. But now it's a very different approach here. And I see the young ones learning. But that's to open the mind to other ideas and to try to get them excited about other ideas, other ways of looking at the world. And that's one of the reasons I try to keep reading the New York Review and a few other periodicals. But we're making movies too, so it's a little hard sometimes. But still, that was one of the main impulses of getting involved with this. And Bob Silvers came to me and asked if we could put something together. David, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to add this one thing, that part of the challenge was this feeling like we wanted to give the review its due. And part of that, of course, is this sense of long form and real analysis. And part of it also is the scope of the review. You don't want it to be a fragment, but you want people to understand really what kinds of things they covered, like the whole spectrum of humanity.
Yes.
And it was very interesting. I thought that the whole process at the end, Marty, where, for instance, where we open with the Oliver Sacks voiceover.
Oh, yes, memory.
Yeah, we just kept on adding more and more voices, more articles, and then we have the voiceover where it's launched with this idea that stories and narration, we put together a narrative, but it's a community thing. It's not one person. It's part of society. I don't know. I thought that was it was interesting how we were able to keep on adding more even until the
Till the very end. Yeah, no, until Monday night.
Yeah, until Monday. Well, literally,
There
it's
might be
actually
something else we're
Tuesday
adding
after
after
dinner.
Sheffield too, so we'll see.
Okay, we got time for one more question. It better be good. Real good.
It's not actually a question. It's more a comment, really, that I thought the film was absolutely wonderful on so many different levels. I love the fact that you brought the writings on the page alive with the people, the contributors themselves. It was just very special. But also the fact that I got a sense of the last 50 years' history and how you'd chosen the iconic moments of our times along with the articles. It was just genius. So I'd like to thank you, and I can't believe I'm actually speaking to Martin Scorsese here. Thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, we can do one more question. There's only a few seconds left. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, Martin and David. I really enjoyed the film, so thank you. Obviously, the film deals with a lot of political issues, the more historical ones and more present-day ones. What kind of political messages do you think the film conveys, either intentionally or unintentionally?
Well, I'll say something first. I think it has to do with, obviously, it's predisposed to human rights, I think, the review. And I guess that's something that we should all be concerned about, particularly in it's a constant, it's not the world the way it is now, it's a constant situation. It's constant. It's something that can be taken for granted. That's something we don't know the history. It can be taken for granted, as I say. And if it isn't taken for granted, it's always in struggle. And if we believe that human beings should have human rights, then this is the direction of, not the direction, but this is the overarching, I think, purpose of this kind of debate, I think. David, what do you think?
Well, I would just add one more thing, that we live in a time people seem very apathetic, or it's easy to think that your voice doesn't count. But what's remarkable to me about the film, it's not so much a political thing, it's just like these 5 people one day decided, hey, we're going to do a magazine. And 2 of them spent their whole life doing this magazine. And you have a sense of the impact of the magazine. And like we always talk about Avishai Margali, who's in the montage with the Dissonance, where he says, it's influence is like the way the knight moves in chess. It moves sideways and then forwards. And that's all I'm going to say. It's not so much a point of view, but an observation.
And also, Abishai says it's a community of ideas. Kind of mental Europe talks about, a community of ideas which has to keep, it can't be censored. That's the thing. The danger is now powerful places where information is censored. And that's why I like Mary Beard's discussion on the classicism and do the classics really matter today? Yes, they do. To learn and know about the thinking and the past and what's happening, the same issues back and forth. But it is about this community of ideas, and and the concept is to keep the ideas flowing, no matter how uncomfortable or how difficult or how enlightening. I don't know, but to keep them alive. And this is something that's, again, it comes out of curiosity. It comes out of curiosity about the world and curiosity about other people and how you live.
Okay, Martin, I want to thank you so much for your time. You've been fantastic. Please thank Mr. Scorsese. And thank you so much for supporting documentary this way. It means a lot to us. Thank you to the Wolf of Sheffield. Thanks, bye.
I just want to add one more thing, which is a little about that thing about how it's easy to be apathetic, or any of the documentary filmmakers here will understand this. The crew who shot Oxford is here, so I just wanted to mention them by name. Mark Carey, Jonathan, what's your last name? Jonathan Mitchell, and Tom. It's this amazing thing in the documentary world. It's very little money. You've never met the person before. You just come together and you shoot. And I think they did a great job, but I think that's also, it's what we always aspire to do, is with very little resources, you know, to come together and do something together, collaboration. So thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Well, this is the first day. I want to talk this tomorrow. But, thanks for coming. Don't forget to vote with your audience, though.